Peace, peace. Welcome to the Cosmic Paradox channel. I'm your host, Cosmic Paradox, and I appreciate y'all for topping in the video today. We are still within the month of October, covering our whole Oktoberfest based on fear, death, and the hidden wisdom of horror. And we're doing a special ode to Hoodoo heritage, which is the highlight of this week, which is week 2. And we are focusing on Hoodoo heritage and ancestral power all this week. Now, also, I want to mention that we are finally launching the watch parties. And this is a major thing for me. This is something I've been looking for the means to be able to do. So I believe that I have finally found the best way to do the watch parties. And it is a part of the Patreon. It's an exclusive thing with the Patreon. And once you sign up for the Patreon, the information and everything is there for you to watch the watch parties. It's something we're going to start doing on Wednesdays. I am shooting for the first one to be this Wednesday, which would be October the 15th. And for the first watch party, I'm leaning towards Skeleton Key. But be on the lookout for a poll just so we can see what the audience might be a little bit more geared towards. So to get that out of the way initially, so now that we have that out of the way, I want to go ahead and get into the context of this video. And what we're going to be talking about in this particular video, we are talking, well, since we are getting into Hoodoo, we're talking about the hidden power of heritage and shadow work. So decoding Hoodoo as an ancestral technology, survival and shadow integration, and reclaiming what has been demonized. I know that they told you Hoodoo was evil. They told you it was superstition, something to fear. But what if Hoodoo is actually the key your ancestors left behind? What if it's a hidden technology of survival and shadow healing? So this is what we're going to be getting into and we're going to be talking about today. Now, yes, it's very common for people to look at Hoodoo and to initially think dark magic, superstition, something to be afraid of. But what if I told you Hoodoo is not about fear at all? It's actually about power. And Hoodoo is ancestral technology. It's how our people survived oppression. It's how we held on to our spirit when the world tried to strip it away. And in this video, we're going to decode the hidden wisdom of Hoodoo, what it really is, why it was demonized, and how it connects to shadow work and healing today. So by the end of this video, you will see Hoodoo not as a story of fear, but as a story of freedom. Now, in the simplest of terms, Hoodoo is African American or Black American folk magic. And I use those words very carefully when it comes to identification because that's a whole nother different conversation that we can talk about in terms of identification. But so-called Black American or African American is rooted in that folk magic. It was born from a collision of indigenous knowledge and spiritual tradition, and also information about the land, in also some African spiritual traditions, and even some elements of Christianity. So it's not a religion. Hoodoo isn't a religion. Now, voodoo is different. Voodoo is a religion, but hoodoo is not a religion. It is a practice. It's a living toolkit, and it is also a closed practice. So it's not something for everybody to just do. These are things that are traditionally handed down to you, and most of the time you don't even realize that it is hoodoo because it's just traditions. It's pretty much embedded in most black people's lives, especially those still rooted in a southern root, right? So colonizers and missionaries tended to call it evil because of course they feared it. So because you can't enslave a people who know how to work with spirit. So this was also very important in understanding why a lot of religious traditions in general and your original religious beliefs are to some degree unknown to you. And that's due to colonization because, of course, they didn't want you to have what could potentially give you power. They would say that there could be some, especially the older people that might be on the plantation who might have had the abilities to be able to bring harm to the slave master or even to some of the people that enforced for the slave master. So when there's things like that that go on and people can't understand, of course it's going to be demonized. Of course it's going to be made to look at as something bad because you don't want, it's already outnumbered. So imagine if all of the slaves had knowledge of how to utilize this power. It would be a lot harder to be able to keep those people enslaved, which is also why you have such a strong component of the mental when it comes to slavery, because you want to mentally you want them to be mentally incapable of being able to see themselves as free, of course, right? So you can't control a people that know how to call on their ancestors for strength. So they branded it as dangerous, superstitious, devil's work. But if you look deeper, hoodoo is simply shadow psychology in action. To a degree, the collective projected fear onto the very thing that very much empowered us. So I get very, it's kind of weird to me to hear our people talk about our ways, our natural means of spirituality in such a negative light, because you're pretty much taking the colonist view. You're pretty much taking on the view of the colonizer, the view of the slave master, the view of the ones that oppressed your ancestors. And when you look at it in that capacity, it'll make you think about it differently, right? Now, the power of belief is very important when it comes to any form of magic, and hoodoo is a form of black people folk magic. So, the power of belief is very vital. And we see this when you look at the movie The Skeleton Key. Now, The Skeleton Key is the movie that I am leaning towards for the watch party. So if you would like to join us for that live in-person decode, well, I won't say in person, but live within the live watch party, decode and ask questions and be a part of that whole experience, then go to my Patreon and sign up for the decoder circle, and you will have access to that. Right. But we're going to talk about I'm leaning towards The Skeleton Key. And in that movie, the main character is told hoodoo only works if you believe. And on the surface, that sounds like superstition. But the truth of it is, belief is the most powerful magic that there is, which is why it is a component in any form of magic that you do. Belief is the bridge between spirit and matter, between the unseen and the seen. So if you don't believe in your own power, then you've already given it away. So this is the purpose of colonizing your soul, colonizing you and taking away your original belief system so that you can believe in something that is outside of yourself. Because in that capacity, you have given away your power because you don't believe in your own power. It's always a strong conversation amongst the black community about self-hate. And that self-hatred is not by accident. That is something that was purposely embedded in us, that collectively that has been handed down, that we have to break away from. And the wild part is that many of us already really practice hoodoo without even realizing it. I'm saying lighting a candle for a loved one, sweeping the doorway to clear energy, keeping jars of herbs or salt or water in the home, talking to your ancestors at the gravesite, even pouring out liquor. That's not random habit. That's ritual. That's ancestral coding that is moving through you. There are so many things that you could be doing that just come from your ancestral practices that you just don't realize it because it's become embedded in your everyday life. And most of the times, most things dealing in a magic or understanding requires you to reframe your mind so that way that you can be able to see it in that capacity. Now the thing about hoodoo is it's not complicated, but it is sacred, right? It is root of four core elements, which is one being your ancestors. So hoodoo begins and ends with those who came before. So altars, prayers, offerings, dreams. It's about relationship with those who walk with you unseen. Now the second core is roots and herbs. So you just talk about nature as medicine and spirit. So that's the red brick dust for protection. Roots, they carry memory of the land itself. Another element of hoodoo is candles and fire. So you light them as intention, flame as spirit made visible. Every candle is a prayer. Every flame is a bridge. And the fourth core element is the crossroads. Now, one of the most powerful, that's one of the most powerful symbols in hoodoo. And what the crossroad represents, and it's been so polluted and inverted when we look at mainstream media and the superstitions that come along with it. It's most of the time when you think crossroads, people think about people selling their souls. This is why they want to do that, because it has to. If you stay disconnected, then you stay disconnected from your power. And the crossroads represent a place of choice, a place of initiation, of sovereignty. Every spiritual path leads back to the crossroads, which is where you decide, am I going to step into fear, or am I going to step into power? These are not spells. It's more scenes of a means of survival, right? They're technologies of survival and sovereignty. And this is what you see in the movie Skeleton Key, because it was all rooted in them surviving. Now, I want to discuss hoodoo as shadow work, because this is very important. If you've been following my content, I'm heavy on shadow work. A lot of things that I do is about shadow work, especially the Patreon. So people that come into the Patreon are typically people who want to get deeper into the knowledge. They want to really practice and focus on their shadow work and their healing. So when it comes to shadow work, hoodoo is shadow work, period, because it forces you to confront what has been buried, not just in yourself, but also in your lineage. So every ritual is about naming what others refuse to name. When you name something, you put it in its place, right? So cleansing what others carry in silence, breaking cycles that were handed down after generation. And most of the time, these bad habits or generational curses as we see them that was handed down was usually something that we adapted to survive some extreme sense of pain. Now, don't make it right, but it's a lot more powerful when you can understand, when you can be aware, especially when it comes to doing the shadow work. So, and also it's important to understand ancestor veneration. A lot of religious people specifically really get this wrong and call it ancestor worship. It's not worship. And in all actuality, highly spiritual people who are really deep in spiritual knowledge and spiritual information, the word worship, you can't just throw it around because you don't understand what somebody is practicing. But it's not ancestor worship, it's veneration. It's veneration. It's very important that we understand that it's ancestor veneration. It's important to understand, right? When it comes to that, there's a deeper understanding of the fact that your ancestors live within you. This is where they go. So they walk with you unseen because they are within you. So when we say ancestor veneration, it's simply the practice of honoring and respecting the relatives that has passed before us through ritual and offering. And that's based on the belief that ancestors have a continued presence and influence on the living. So how can they still continue to influence and have a presence on the living? This is how you can really look at that, even if a person isn't all that deep into the spiritual knowledge. Well, they still influence you because they live through you. They're in your blood. They're literally a part of your DNA. So in that capacity, they can influence your decisions because you can have certain things embedded within your DNA that influences your decision making. You might even be making decisions based on former or based on ancestors that made those decisions before you, and you are the chosen one in your lineage to make a different decision. So practices of ancestor veneration would include leaving out food and drink as offering, right? Just giving thanks, or maintaining an altar to maintain a connection to their spirits and ensure their continued well-being. And people have altars and don't even know they have altars, because a lot of people, they might have a whole wall dedicated to people that's been within their family, along with tables that have pictures of these ancestors with on these tables, and they don't realize that's a form of an altar to a certain degree, kind of unknowingly, maybe unintentionally. But when you do it with intention, then you add certain aspects to it to charge it, to make it more powerful, to make it more sacred. And when we go back to the movie The Skeleton Key, right, what do we see? We see a woman that didn't believe until it was too late. She dismissed hoodoo as superstition until it was too late, until it overtook her. And that's the danger of ignoring your shadow, because it's what you refuse to face, and that's what ends up controlling you. So understand that naturally hoodoo and working with your ancestors to cleanse your bloodline and your lineage is a form of shadow work. So what I like to do a lot of times is make connections from things that don't seem to be connected. So shadow work is typically discussed in psychology, right? Hoodoo is a cultural traditional practice. So you wouldn't think those things would be have a connection, but they actually can have a connection. And I like to do this because I feel like this kind of bring it's all about perspective and being able to reframe. And sometimes a person just hearing something a different way can help to elevate them or take them to the next level.